because what we're talking about here is the Supreme Court has refused to review a lower court's dismissal of the U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals that basically said that the government officials were immune from lawsuit because at the time it was unclear whether abusing prisoners at Guantanamo was illegal. And this lawsuit has basically, or this Supreme Court rejection of review has basically said that it's completely permissible for the government people to use torture and religious humiliation on its so-called enemy combatants.
Yeah, you've got a whole sequence, a whole dominoes effect here going on. One, starting with the non-declaration of war for those who are constitutionalists out there, and those of us who understand that the Constitution has not stopped these guys from doing things they're not supposed to do. It's just a group of people down there who are writing up laws and doing things to hurt people in almost every instance. And they excuse it by this saying, well, we're in a war or we're trying to help people or whatever.
These are terrorists.
Yeah, it's all bogus. It's fake. It's absolutely fake. And it's predicated on an immoral construct. But we'll get to that at another time. Right now, for those of you who are, pro-constitutionalists, there's a sequence in the United States Constitution for the operation of the military. If you think that that's the way it's supposed to work, then you have to declare war. They did not declare war. The White House under George Bush asked Congress not to declare war so that if they captured people, they wouldn't have to treat them under the Geneva Accords. If people actually read the Geneva Accords, they'll see that it doesn't matter whether you have declared war. You still have to treat them under the auspices of POWs.
Rule schmools,
Exactly.
Gardner. We're the government. We'll do whatever the hell we want. And you know what? You'll put up with it, because if you don't, we might put you in a cage.
That's right. And by the way, this is going to have a bearing on whether or not anybody can try Dick Cheney or any of these things for war crimes from other countries, because this is the way this sort of stuff goes. But yeah, the story here also opens up, as we mentioned before the break, because not only are they in an undeclared war, which means that if they have not declared war, they can't hold them as POWs. Therefore, they have to hold them under U.S. code, U.S. criminal code. Any of these guys, you always hear these people saying, well, what are we going to do? Read them their Miranda rights out there in the battlefield? Well, guess what? You pinheads didn't declare stinking war, so you're going to have to operate under U.S. law as if you're trying to apprehend people. The only alternative is to issue a writ of marque and reprisal, which means that, or mark and reprisal, and that means that you can hire people to go out and get these guys. Now, this is all under that dusty thing that nobody pays any attention to anyway, and hasn't stopped the tyranny, the supposed U.S. Constitution. But that's the way it's supposed to work. So these guys, they're trying to slip through the cracks. They're saying, well, I'm George Bush, see, and what we did was, well, we didn't declare war, see, so we don't have to hold them as prisoners of war. We're holding them as enemy combatants. And for a while, as the Patriot Act declared, for the first few years of the Patriot Act, any U.S. citizen could be held that way too.
That's right.
Yep, and so therefore...
I'm pretty sure it can still be... You could be called an enemy combatant. I don't think that's been withdrawn, has it?
They did change it so that it's only foreigners that can be held as enemy combatants right now. But I don't know. There's some tricks that I think they could probably pull. But last I knew, Judge Napolitano was pretty sharp on that stuff.
Interesting.
Yeah, he was good. But the thing that gets me is, so they haven't declared war, therefore these guys are supposed to be able to be tried under U.S. criminal code. Instead, they're held in Guantanamo. They're tortured. They're not prisoners of war. We can do this. No Geneva Accords. Right? Then some people protest in the United States saying, well, hold on a second. You got to give these guys a proper trial. Well, all these conservatives are saying, they're foreigners. They don't, and this is where we get to the point that we had earlier in the previous segment, they don't deserve the rights granted to us under the Constitution.
So sick.
See? And so this is where all this twisted mentality comes. It's such unclear thinking. And it continues. This article, this is very interesting. This is from antiwar.com. Says, channeling their predecessors in the George W. Bush administration, Obama Justice Department lawyers, all you lefties out there who thought Obama was the savior, argued in this case that there is no constitutional right not to be tortured or otherwise abused in a U.S. prison abroad. And so many people say this sort of stuff. Excuse me, there are certain rules for the operation of the U.S. government, aren't there?
So they claim. And
those rules are predicated on what? Plato? There's this thing called the Constitution. But, of course, it's malleable as Plato, according to these people. It says here, the Obama administration had asked the court not to hear the case. By agreeing, the court let stand an earlier opinion by the D.C. Circuit Court, which found that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, a statute that applies by its terms to all persons, did not apply to detainees at Guantanamo, effectively ruling that the detainees are not persons at all for purposes of U.S. law.
This is where you get to you start going down this rabbit hole, this legalese, maddening rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Where people have called this show before, and I've looked into this, right, where they'll say that, well, you're not a person. Well, what do you mean I'm not a person? Well, if you look at the legal definition of person, you're not necessarily a person. A person can be a corporation. A person can be this. A person can be that. It's not necessarily a human being, flesh and life human being. It's not necessarily that. A person is a legal construct. It's a corporate entity that the government has created to act upon. And it's all very, very fantastic sounding and very interesting. But the reality is, if you get in front of a robed man and say, "Ho, I'm not that person," they don't care. They're going to put you in a cell. It doesn't matter. So what I'm saying is there's this corporate person conspiracy out there. Well, they say, well, if you look at your driver's license, your name is in all caps, and that shows that you're a corporation. It's not actually you. That's a corporate person that they've created. It's a straw man that they act upon, and you just have to separate yourself from it. But it doesn't matter because it's all very interesting, and it's really based in something. Like those claims that they make, when you start looking into it, you start thinking, wow, these guys are onto something. Because when you look into it, you look up the legal definition of person, and you do all of these things, you start finding out very bizarre things. I mean, how could they say that those people are not persons? It's because the term person is able to be defined by them. The term person is what they say a person is. So basically, they're saying that if we call you an enemy combatant, you're no longer a person, and so all of the U.S. law, which applies to persons, doesn't apply, because now you're an enemy combatant.
I feel like I'm in some sort of weird fantasy world.
It is so bizarre. There's more coming up here, 800-259-90.